Hello and welcome to Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at D1Baseball.com. I'm your host, Joe Healy, joined today once again by David Seifert, a D1 Baseball's own David Seifert, Prep Baseball's Director of College Scouting, David Seifert. He has been all over in the fall. This time around, he's seen Alabama, he's seen Tennessee, a couple of teams that obviously there's a lot of interest in Tennessee off a national title, but Alabama similarly a lot to replace, and a team that's been pretty old the last couple of years, and so that the roster's turning over a little bit. Excited to talk with Seif about that. After Seif and I talk, going to bring on Mark Etheridge. He saw LSU recently, so we're going to talk a little bit about LSU after my conversation with Seif. We had Seif in the 2 spot last week. Seif is batting leadoff this week. So he's gonna battle and see some pitches and get on base, and then let his speed work for us. So we're gonna put Seif. I feel like we're setting Seif up to succeed by putting him in the leadoff spot.
That's a strong move. I only had 1 home run in my 4-year college career, so that's super. Until they moved me in my mound only, I was a PO only going to my junior year after that. So that's a strong move by you, Joe. Appreciate
it. I have to ask now that you've said it. What do you remember about the 1 home run?
It was on a windblown day in junior college, and I didn't get all of it, but I got enough of it to blow out to right center. Yeah, how about that? I was left-handed hitter too, so I got barrel on it, but maybe not full barrel. So
okay, well look, they don't ask how, they just ask how many, and in this case, the 1 counts just the same as a Caden Bogenpool's 465. You know,
it certainly looks that way on the stat sheet. You're right.
They all count the same. Let's talk Bama first, Seif. You saw them against Florida State, which had to be a lot of fun because, Florida State also obviously not an SEC team for our purposes here today, but a lot of talent there. Sounded like Jamie Arnold was on his game. A lot of excitement about him. But tell us about Alabama. You last week when we chatted with you, you said you're excited to kind of see just what this new look roster looks like. They've been so old for a couple of years. Let me start us this way. Did you come away kind of more impressed what you saw in the batter's box or on the mound with Alabama?
I would say on the mound, especially since Riley Quick hasn't returned yet, so you just add his that elite level arm to what they put out there on the mound. I'd say definitely the arms. With that said, they have so many new faces on offense, and it was just they played 2 sevens, right? So it's 14 innings, and it was maybe 3 at bats, 4 at bats on like the starters, and then just maybe 2 at bats on some of their newer guys. It's what you see on that day, though, and that's what we'll talk about today.
Yeah, I'm interested. Zane Adams, in particular, I think is a guy who flew a little under the radar last year. Had a really nice year for Alabama. Took some lumps because that's how it works in the SEC. Mm-hmm. But to what extent do you look at him and see, hey, this could be a Friday guy in the SEC. This could be a guy that MLB organizations should be looking at early in the draft when he's eligible.
I saw Bama at home last year, and I just stayed for the 2 first games. Hess and then the lefty transfer from Louisville. His name escapes me. He pitched on Saturday, so I just took off for 2 days and went elsewhere. So I missed Zane Adams, but Zane Adams is a different guy. Well, then I started looking into Zane Adams more because he's sophomore eligible for this year's draft. So, I had to put him somewhere, even though I hadn't seen him just on video. But it was just mostly fastball, high slot, so a curveball. He's added a cutter, and it's really good. It's 89-90, really sharp, gets in on the right-handed hitters, hard and late, gives the left-handed hitters fits because he just runs it away from them. And it was a really good pitch. I would say, gosh, pro-wise, it's a 55, potential to be plus to even better. Really, I'm not sure when he started to learn it, but it's a really good pitch for him. I think that's going to be a difference maker for him this coming spring.
Anything else you saw on the mound from Alabama that stood out as being particularly interesting to you?
Overall, they have a lot of different looks, and I think that's going to go a long ways. Just what coach can do, right? Hey, I want to go with the lefty, the lower slot lefty. I want to go to the submarine right, not really sub, but they had some sidearm righties. The one guy who really was impressive was the Penn transfer. You're going to have to help me with the
Osmer.
Osmer, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a different look. Fastball's up to 93, like I said, from sidearm slot, low 70s, mid 70s changeup, but he was super impressive. He just pitched a 1 inning, 3 up, 3 down for the same save in game 1. It was a 3-1 final in game 1. And it was just, everything from what he was throwing over the plate to how he's attacking the hitters to just how he did it. I think he's obviously a difference maker for them. Aiden
Yep.
Moza. I mean, the stuff is there, right? I think he needs to get a little more movement to his fastball, but it was up to 93 that day. It's straight and has to develop maybe more command of it, because it is straight. He has control of it, but it's too straight. You got to get plus command for it to play. But I mean, the stuff's there. He's got a good changeup and a good slider cutter, whatever you want to call it. It's 84, 87. Sometimes it looks like a cutter. Sometimes it's got some depth to a slider, but whatever. It's a solid breaking ball. But kind of same thing there is he can only throw that so much, right? But he was solid. They got a lefty, junior college lefty. I think it's Bo Bryans.
Yeah.
Different look, low 3/4 slot, well across his body for some big time deception. But he's up to 93 too, so it's not just like the soft tosser from down low. It's guys bringing some velocity from lower slots. And then the guy I really liked, Austin Morris, 92, 94, flashed better than average, maybe a plus slider. Kind of gets around it, just his arm action and his takeout and his path and everything. He was getting around it a lot in warm-ups and then the first couple he threw in the game. But once he got the feel for it, clicking it out front and banging it, he threw some pretty good ones. So just those guys, that was all their first game arms. So I was just impressed right there. But then you got Faye started the second game, and Faye is what he is. He's going to throw strikes. He's going to compete. Doesn't have overwhelming stuff, but he's going to reach back for a 3 and a 4. He's got a cutter, a changeup that sinks a little bit, slider, kind of a good mix. And then from there, they just had some, again, what as to the theme I was saying, just some different looks with different velocities, different strengths, maybe one with a curveball, maybe one with a moving fastball. But overall, I think it's a staff that has some potential. Nothing huge elite for the draft, but definitely some competitive innings there for them in their league.
On the position player side, Justin LeBron is obviously the headliner there for Alabama. And I go back to this comment. I've mentioned this a couple times on various podcasts. Obviously, I knew he was a really good player, but I heard Chris Burke say on TV the last year that, when he's up in the draft in a couple of years, like he could be a 1-1 type of guy. Now, I'm not going to put you on the spot and have you, react to that, but it just tells you that if Chris Burke is saying that, then there's not nothing to that, right? Like,
he's been there, yeah.
Right, exactly. So, but anyway, your just general observations on Justin LeBron, not just with what you saw in this look, but just in general from having evaluated him before.
Certainly guy first round, certainly first half of day one, elite defender. He's just natural defender, right? He just picks it and throws it, and it's just supernatural. Like he's going to stay there. There's no doubt. So that elevates him already. His production as a freshman puts him up in their conversation already. I'm not sure 1-1. I want to see more power. Usually hitters that are taken top half the first round, even really the first round, they got to have plus raw power, right? Whether they're producing at a plus rate, that's one thing, but they just have to have some 112s, 113s, 114s off the bat, right? LeBron's not there yet, but he is wiry strong. So I'm not saying he can't get there. But yeah, if you want to go have some fun and watch a guy defend, just natural, it's really fun. And yeah, he is their best hitter, not really a power hitter, but he is their guy. And he's a plus runner too. So he has a lot of tools and he's performed. So he's definitely a fun one to watch.
I'm just going to, for the listeners' benefit, we talked about how much they're replacing here. Like, I'm just going to throw out like some names of some new guys they might be relying on. And then once I've done that list there, Seif, you can kind of react to any of those names or anything that stands out to you. But we're talking, Brady Neal, LSU transfer catcher. That's a big name guy. Never really got it going at LSU. Injuries were a part of that, but Jason Torres from Miami at first base, Garrett Staten from Samford, Brennan Norton from Jacksonville State. We've got some JC guys, Bryce Fowler that I've heard some good things about, Richard Bonamolo. They've got a big name freshman, Andre Modugno, who at least physically looks the part. So those are some of the guys. That just gives you an idea of like the sheer volume of guys that they're looking at that might insert into the lineup that is largely just kind of LeBron and Hodo and, Cade Snell returning. So I gave you a whole long list there, Seif, but of those guys or anyone else who stands out, like who do you like from what you saw Alabama offensively?
Yeah, you pretty much named everybody that played. I know Modugno, he's the freshman two-way guy, supposed to be a star. He didn't pitch on this look, and then he had one at bat where it just didn't look like he's seen the ball well. He took a curveball for a called third strike. It wasn't his at bat, right? And I also kind of heard that he wasn't seeing much time, so maybe he's concentrating on pitching more. I don't know the whole deal, but that was just the one at bat look I saw. Torres kind of similar, froze on a breaking ball, flew out to opposite field on a fastball. So just the timing's not there, the recognition's not there, whatever. So I hate to talk about the two guys that you all mentioned that didn't really perform on this look, but again, it's just a one-day look. The guy I did like, I have some history with Bonamolo. He wasn't particularly impressive on this day, but the tools are there. He can run, he can throw. I mean, in junior college, he put the bat on the ball with power. He can defend. He's a toolsy guy that brings with him production. So I just think maybe the day just got sped up on him too much. He needs to make some adjustments. But he put the ball in play a couple times, struck out on a changeup, his first at bat. Who doesn't strike out on a changeup when you're geared up, ready to play your first at bat, right? But I think at the end of the day, he's going to be a guy for him. I've been a fan of Neal at LSU. I just thought he should have played more there, but I'm not the coach and I don't want to be the coach. But so him going to Alabama, getting a chance to play, that's great. However, again, he struck out twice in 3 at bats, and it just wasn't his day. He still seems to be the same guy, just swing through breaking stuff. But he caught fine, he received fine. I mean, he did everything else was good. Just the bat on this look was a little short, but I expect him to be there in the lineup. I've always been a big fan of Cade Snell too, another junior college guy that I have some history with. I think he was at forget what junior college in Alabama he went to, but actually I believe he start off at Auburn, go JUCO, and now he's at Alabama. I think that's his.
Something like that. Yeah, the JUCO might have been Snead. I think
that is it. Snead. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Snell from Snead. But I've always liked him. I think he's going to hit. I think he's a 5-hole guy for them. I know there's some pro interest late in the year last year. I think when he finally got up to playing, because when I saw Alabama earlier in the year, he really didn't play much. I think he just got a couple pinch hits, one in each game or something. But I think there's some pro interest there, and I would have interest as a pro scout. Maybe not based on what I saw in his 3 at bats on Saturday, but certainly, I mean, I like the bat to ball, I like the body. There's some power there. Good player, and I think he'll eventually end up somewhere in the middle of the lineup as well. And then I forgot the other guy you mentioned. Was it Staten? Or no, Fowler? You mentioned Fowler. Fowler's another JUCO guy. Like, they got a ton of JUCO guys, right? Like Fowler from Pearl River Junior College. Big numbers in junior college. There's tools. There's a great athleticism. He had a leadoff home run in the second game. Just huge. I mean, he got all of it, crushed it to his pull side right field. It was impressive, and a great way for Alabama to jump on top in game 2 after they'd just taken the first game. He runs plus, he throws above average. He's kind of similar to Bonamolo and we got 2 guys that can hit leadoff. They're toolsy, they're athletic. Which one are we going to choose from? Really, I guess the one they choose from is one that's going to tell them that they're that guy, right? But then the other one just goes to the 9-hole. So they've got some good decisions to make, or some fun decisions to make.
Yeah. No, such a good point. I mean, that's the flip side of it. And it's part of the reason why with Alabama, I don't really have any real feel for what this team is going to be, because I just feel like there's such a wide variance between, I just don't know what to expect. I mean, and that's fun for folks like you and I, because we have no stakes in the game and we can just observe, but yeah, I don't know what to expect with this group.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, I mean, they went to Tallahassee and split, and now it's their umpires are fans. It was a regular day. I mean, it was a regular game situation. They split with one of the best teams in the country, so I think that tells us a little bit there. So everything I said about this guy looked at a curveball, and this guy did that. I mean, they were playing against. I mean, Jamie Arnold was pitching, right? And they had Prescott throwing 97. I don't want to get too deep on the Seminoles, but they were facing guys, so. It wasn't like they went down the street to play to junior college. So it was
that's fair.
It was a really good day to watch 14 innings baseball.
Yeah. Cleaning up something from earlier, Snell's JUCO, Wallace Dothan.
Wallace Dothan. Gotcha.
Yeah. So we had it wrong there, but we're in the interest of journalistic principles, Seif, we had to correct ourselves there.
I like that. That's one thing I really like about you, Joe.
Yeah, the rest of the guys, Kendall and Aaron, it's whatever. They're just
exactly. They just make it up, right?
That's right, making it up as they go. But we stick to our principles here. Let's talk Tennessee, Seif. The first thing with Tennessee, as you saw them play Western Kentucky, is I noticed on the starting lineup they had Keelan and Curley listed as middle infield on the original starting lineup. did they move them around or something? Was there something to that where they were like switching, between innings or something? Or maybe you just didn't, maybe it wasn't that big of a thing, but I did notice they had him listed as middle infield on the lineup sheet.
Yeah, there's some of that. Curly mostly played shortstop, though. I mean, that's like, I think down the road he is a third baseman.
Yeah.
He just doesn't make that body control play coming in to get the ball efficiently or effectively enough, whatever we want to say. So I think he goes to third, but Fisher's at third, right? So like Fisher is, Fisher's good enough to play third. He's who was their third baseman last year? I'm sorry, it's
Amick.
yeah, Amick. Fisher's a hair better than Amick defensively, hair better hands, but fairly similar. So he can play there. Fisher will stay there. So what do you do with Curly? Leave him at short. Well, Killen second short. They got some nice problems. They certainly do.
That's to me, that's the most interesting thing with Tennessee when you look at just a roster management standpoint, because the other piece that we didn't talk about here is the best defensive shortstop they have is probably Ariel Antigua.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
so like, if you've got him on the roster, are you not going to put your best defender there? And it sounds like the answer might be no, but I mean, that's why, that staff is who they are and, does what they do and they'll figure it out. But it strikes me that infield is just, is pretty loaded with a lot of good options.
No, you've hit on the head. I mean, the other guy who can play the crap out of shortstop is Marin.
Yeah,
he's just a freshman, but man. If you want to talk the best defensive shortstop, I'd throw him in that conversation. It was fun. He's a fun one.
Yeah, I saw in some scrimmages they've been throwing him out in the outfield just to try to like get him in the just because he's that level of like just ball player. So they just want to find a spot for him. But give me your impressions on Keelan, a guy I know you've seen a decent bit because Louisville's a relatively easy trip for you. How do you think he takes on the SEC? What are you kind of expecting from him this season? What did you see from him?
Yeah, I wouldn't say toolsy, but he has enough tools. He's an average runner, average arm. It's probably 40, 45 raw power, but he's got bat speed. He's more of a doubles guy. Super aggressive at the plate. So I think my only concern with him not performing right away is maybe just just having a better plan, swinging at the first pitch you swing at, make it better than a borderline strike, kind of thing. And right now he's kind of more of a middle in hitter, so he's got to be able to use all fields. But as far as a prospect, as far as a guy, I mean, he's a top 3 round type guy going into the It's a process, but right now I'd say he's a guy you want to tell your cross check third round, something like that. And if he does better, then you move him up, right? So
Fisher too, interesting. You mentioned he's a little bit better than Amick. Amick I think is a good comp just from the standpoint of it's a similar type of player in that offense first, questions about the defense, but you're just kind of hoping that the defense is good enough to where you don't have to pull the plug on it. And it sounds like, at least in your estimation, it sounds like he's probably going to, do enough there. But the bat is ultimately where he's going to make his, I guess, in the NIL era, where he's literally making his money.
All right. Like defensively, they're comparable. I would say Fisher's hands are a hair better. Their mobility range is about the same. But I think Amick threw a hair better, right? So you're talking about there's similar builds too. Fisher, I'll tell you what, though, he's not really, hate to say he's selling out because he's a good overall hitter, but man, he was uphill and pull side, and he was just looking to launch, and he did. He got all of one. His first at bat as a volunteer, right? Like how appropriate. He hits the ball a mile to his pull side. It was pretty awesome. Yeah. And then Curly followed him with a home run in the left field. So it was back to back first at bats of the night for each guy. Pretty impressive start. Fisher has some good patience too. I think he walked a time or two. And as soon as I say, he's sold out for power to the pull side, I look at my notes. He singled a line drive to center field and then stole to second base. So he's not a 5-tool guy, but he can do all 5-tool things. I mean, he's solid in every phase, and the power being his top tool for sure.
Yeah. So there's some familiarity here, even though they turn over a decent bit of the lineup with that star-studded group. But we mentioned Curly, Keelan, Fisher. But I'm curious for any impressions that you had for kind of this group of guys. They're just going to need to step up, right? Guys who have been in the program maybe, or some of the newcomers they have. Kind of empty the notebook on us for some other offensive pieces that you have thoughts about for Tennessee.
before I empty the notebook on guys that need to step up, right? I'm going to empty the notebook on guys I was super impressed with, and
Well, let's
it really
do it.
it starts with Abernathy, and sorry, he's a freshman. First name, I would love to say his first name. It is
He goes by
Jay
Jay.
Abernathy.
Yeah.
I mean, center fielder. He DH'd, but like, man, his bat to ball is exceptional. He's kind of like Enrique Bradfield with just superior, a way better swing. I mean, I love Bradfield, but I didn't like his swing. Just he'll figure it out, right? But Abernathy, man, beautiful swing. He's got doubles power. He's not real physical yet, but he will be in that strength and conditioning program. He's 5'10", 170, but pretty soon he'll be 180 and 190, and he'll be juicing balls out to all fields. Super impressed. Freshman. I don't know. I could go on, but I think he had a couple RBIs, a couple hits, had a sac fly, just really set the tone for that offense at the top. And I don't think they've had a true leadoff guy like what I saw from him in his 5 at-bats in the first game. Just, he blew me away. I was like, hey, this is what you need to be in front of the Ensleys and the Fishers and the Curleys. So to part one or part two of your question, the guys that really need to step up, I mean, not to be critical, but like, Peebles needs to, like, let's go. It's go time, right? Like, You're great as a freshman. You had your ups and downs as a sophomore. You're a switch hitting catcher. It's go time, baby. Like, he's still kind of caught in that, like, in between speed, right? Like, a little late on the fastball, out in front of the breaking ball. Kind of, okay, he just showed me he can be a good defensive catcher, but now why was your throw high and wide? You know what I mean? So he's still in that process. I really hope he figures it out, because if he does, my eyes are like, okay, do they perform? But like, are they prospects? So like,
sure,
he's a top 5, top 4 round prospect if he just puts together what he's capable of doing. But he really, right, from both sides of the play, just really pulls off the baseball right now, and like, you can't really have long term success unless you're Geo Stanton. Like, you can pull off and hit it a mile to your pull side, like if you're built like that, but Peebles is not.
Right.
I love Perry. When Perry was in junior college, he was one of my favorites. Alex Perry, big time player from Pearl River. We talked about Pearl River for Alabama, but Pearl River is a perennial junior college power. They got guys everywhere. But loved him when he was in junior college. Super athletic. Played shortstop there. They can kind of move around to second, short, third. Play first base because he's 6'3", really athletic, got some power. He needs to improve the bat to ball skills, but once he does, I mean, it's a complete ball player. Positional flexibility, just gives him a lot of versatility. Reese Chapman, I saw him this summer in the Cape. He swung and missed there a lot, and on this day, he put the ball in play better, but just wasn't real hard contact. So, but I think was he a sophomore or junior now? You know these guys better than me. What is he? He's a junior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's time for him to figure it out, right? It's time for him to, like, all right, Reese, you're in the 5-hole, go get him. Go give us 320 and 12 home runs or whatever. He's quite capable of doing that, but you asked me who needs to step up, and I'm give him to you. And then the last guy, another JUCO guy, and I've always been on him too. I love when Tennessee got him 2 years ago. It's Colby Backus. Yeah. I mean, if you're drawing a picture of what a guy should look, a power hitting guy should look like, it's Backus, but the guy is a freak because he also runs like a 6'5", 60, and he's 6'4", like 230 or whatever. So it's like oozes tools, oozes athleticism, oozes everything. But you're like, all right, man, put it together. Put the bat on the ball, drive the ball, drive the ball. And he was good, not great. He had a single, flew out deep to the left, but he also had two strikeouts on off-speed pitches. So it's, it's kind of that. But again, if there's anyone, it's kind of like the Baltimore Orioles. You send them a hitter, they're going to get the most out of the hitter. Tennessee's like the same, man. Send them a hitter, they'll get something out of the guys. So, even though they don't have that crazy good lineup like last year, they have the potential to be crazy good.
Yeah, it's part of why Tennessee really is kind of the Death Star of college baseball right now, because they, most teams do a couple of things well, but they recruit high-end freshmen. They still are they get really good transfers, and they develop the heck out of their own players. I think about, Kavar's Tears, for example, right? Took him some time, but eventually he figured it out. And, who's to say Reese Chapman or Colby Backus isn't that guy this year? Like, that would not be a shock at all. Because that's who's
this year's Tears or Lipscomb, right? Lipscomb was that
Trey
guy.
Lipscomb's the other one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So well too. Yeah. So
dude's in the big leagues now.
To your point, like, they do a great job. Yep.
Yeah, and so when you do all those three things well, like that's like you pretty much got it cornered. So let's talk about the mound. The one guy I want to ask you specifically about is Liam Doyle and your kind of impressions on him because it feels like he's going to have to be a pretty important piece for them.
Yeah, if AJ Russell doesn't come back, right, like Doyle's going to have to obviously really, really step up for him. And I'm not saying he has to be their Friday night guy, but it's either him or Snead, right? Like one of those two has to step up and fill AJ's shoes. But I was impressed with Doyle. Big physical lefty, kind of relieverish look if you're looking at it through like a pro lens. But we talked about Adams from Alabama earlier. Like if you look at him, it's kind of like a reliever, stiff reliever look. Doyle's a big body, hard throwing lefty. He was up to 97. Good ride on his fastball. Kind of more of a backup slider and a work in progress changeup. So it's a 70-75% fastball guy, but it's super effective. I mean, he was up at the letters, living at the letters 95 to 97. And there's some deception there with the higher effort level too. So he's going to get guys out, but he's got to develop that second pitch.
Other guys, speaking of reliever looks, a couple guys who feel a little more like throwers than pitchers right now. Marcus Phillips, one of them. Tanner Franklin, the transfer from Kennesaw. I'm assuming both of those guys threw when you saw them against Western Kentucky. What's your level of confidence in either or both of them kind of rounding out and becoming a more complete pitcher as we move forward?
I've always been a big fan of Phillips. Again, we go to a junior college guy. Marcus Phillips was at Iowa Western for 1 year as a freshman, was pretty much hurt the entire year. So really everything most of the innings he's logged. He went to Tennessee as a two-way guy, but I think he's now just a PO. But if you look at the guy, 6'4", 225, it's really loose. It's athletic. It's everything you're looking for. There's sink on his fastball. He's 96 to 98. He flashes a plus slider. He just struggled on this look. Again, he's everything you're looking for. He walked 4 in 2/3 of an inning, gave up 2 hits, struck out one guy, but just really struggled to. At first, it was just a struggle to control the life on his fastball. He was barely missing, like 3 inches in, 3 inches, 3 inches glove side, 3 inches arm side, whatever. But then it just kind of snowballed into like, all right, now he's up and out. Now he's just kind of all over the place, and they had to pull him mid-inning. So it wasn't a great look other than the 96 to 98 flashed in the plus slider. So he's got the ability. But, yeah, it's time for him to step up and just be either the lockdown closer or, there's starter material there. He's athletic. He's got a change of slider and a fastball, and, he's got the starter look and everything else. But certainly one, that needs to step up.
It would help if I hit the mute button and turned it off.
There we go. I was like, what's wrong with my computer now? All right. I'm glad.
Nope, it's me. That was me. For the listeners, that awkward pause was Joe forgetting that he was muted. What else you got on the Vols and the mound, Seif? What else stood out to you as you got your look at them?
They have a couple lefties, Benke. Andrew Benke,
yep.
Junior lefty. He's 5'10", not real big, not really a pro guy, but there's deception with that fastball. It's up to 90, 91. He's kind of got a little delayed release. He's slow. He's slow at the beginning, and then he just snaps it on in there. He set him up and down like there's no problem at all. Sharman, he can pitch a bit. He's a JUCO transfer from Michael Sharman from Georgia Highlands College, and Again, not a power arm, not going to be like this guy. And there's no replacing probably one of my all-time favorite pitchers ever, even though I forget his name. But he's the bearded lefty that pitched it seemed like 7 years there. Help me out.
Kirby Cannell.
Yeah. He could be potentially replace Cannell in that role. But he pitched well. Another guy from Pearl River was Thomas Crabtree, a right-handed pitcher. I was hoping for more. Now, he was good. He was 89, 91. I think he's going to have a role. I had heard like he's more 93, 95. So maybe just, like sore from getting to the lifting program or whatever. There's a million things that, going on with these kids when they first get to school. But he's got the makings of a swing and miss curveball. It's an up and down one. He's a high 3/4 slot guy. It's got some teeth, some late teeth to it. So I think eventually Crabtree's going to develop into a ninth, whether he's a middle reliever or a potential midweek starter. he's got the athleticism, the loose arm, and a nice delivery. And then Hunley was good. He just threw an inning. He rode his fastball. He's also sunk it, and then he had a real wide breaking slider. So he was again. It was just a 1 inning look, but he was definitely successful. And then you had mentioned Tanner Franklin. Man, it's a big arm. It's definitely a project. He's definitely a project. He was up to 95. He more or less pitched at 91, 92. It's certainly more, hey, man, just throw it in the middle of the plate and just let it eat, as opposed to, hey, let's spot up here or there or whatever. But, there's like they do, right? They take the big arm, they develop that big arm, and Franklin could be next in line to be that big arm that develops into a third, fourth rounder. But on this look, he was only 95. He's got a true cutter that was about 89. And then his slider kind of had average spin on it. It wasn't great. It wasn't bad, but just kind of average spin slide. But really on this look, it was just the true cutter was good to see. And he settled at 92 and found the zone. So, yeah.
Yeah, to be clear, no one in the program is saying this, but some people had told me like Tanner Franklin, that's like Chase Dolander again, right? And I'm like, well,
no,
it's not quite
school.
that easy. Yeah, same state.
School. I'm sorry, 96.
Yeah, but same state. Yeah, Georgia Southern and Kennesaw, so like same state, but
not close. Not close. Yeah,
right. But it's just not that easy, right? It's just not. He's tall and throws hard and whatever. It came from a mid-major, but like it's not quite that simple. But certainly you're right.
Dolander is a pitcher, was a pitcher, and is a pitcher. Franklin is a thrower. So.
Yeah, and that's look, I mean, to your point, you get those guys in there, and they're going to come out. They're like moldable clay, and they'll come out as a better version, and that's what Frank Anderson and Tony and the gang have done so well, and the reason why they're coming off a national title. So I'm sure these guys will be a better version of themselves come April, May, and then for their sake, hopefully June. So Seif, this has been wonderful as always. Always good to get your thoughts on these teams and just to give us a really kind of like in the weeds breakdown on some of these players, because your insight on that is obviously, just a more astute than jokers like me and Mark who, kind of
sure.
play them on TV, So anyway, so Seif, I appreciate you joining us once again and helping us along on fall ball in the SEC.
No problem. Anytime, Joe.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then I will come back with, speaking of Mark, we'll come back with Mark Etheridge, and he'll give us his thoughts on LSU as he saw them play Samford, 21 innings of baseball against Samford last weekend. So hold tight. We'll be right back. All right, thank you once again to David Seifert for coming on and helping us out, talking a little bit about Alabama and Tennessee, two of the more interesting teams in the SEC, just from a roster turnover and new faces standpoint. Those are two teams that should be interesting to follow come springtime. And now we're back in our comfort zone. I'm back with my good friend and co-host Mark Etheridge. This is a little bit of I guess half of a regular episode of Highway to Hoover, because Mark is going to come on and talk a little bit about a little team from Baton Rouge called LSU. Maybe you've heard of them. He saw LSU take on Samford. Good little exhibition matchup. Samford always pretty talented. And if you don't believe me, look at SEC rosters from the last couple of years. Obviously a lot of wins, regional appearances, the whole bit. Tony David and his staff do a really good job there. So that was probably a pretty quality, as far as exhibitions go, a pretty quality one. My first question mark, though, is they played 21 innings. Has your tailbone recovered?
It's tough, man. If they'd played 22, I'd have probably left. I mean, it was right teetering on the edge there in that final inning. And they did play the bottom of the seventh, even though LSU was leading. It was 9-2 or something. And of course, you got to get in that extra half inning. Yeah. So we had all of that. It was, 42 half innings. It was quite a day. But there's pros and cons to that, right? Because a lot of times, you might have a 9, 10 inning, 11 inning game, and you see 11 pitchers for 11 innings. Okay, so with this format, you got to see guys throw 2 innings, and in some cases 3 innings. And that you really get a longer look, and you see other stuff holes. And it's like with Chase Shores, LSU's ace. He looked better in the 3rd inning. I mean, he was good throughout. but he got better as it went on, and that was great to see because he's a guy who hadn't pitched a whole lot, right? He was a weekend starter early in his freshman year at LSU. Great, prep prospect. Shows up and gets injured, misses all of the national title year, then misses all of last year. So now he's poised to be their guy. They have a lot of guys, but he's poised to be the Friday starter. So it was great to get a long look at him. And he's a 6'8" righty. It's just a real long, easy delivery. Looks like he's just out there playing catch. And he looked good. And that's a staff with a lot of options. And in a showcase like that, they threw they had 21 innings to fill. Okay, they threw an 11-inning intra squad the day before. Okay, so they're pitching both sides of that. There's not a lot of rosters in the country with enough quality pitching to fill that amount of innings, right, in game situations. So so I really came away impressed with LSU's pitching depth. That's probably the if you're going to focus on one thing that impressed me, that was it.
Yeah, it's such a good point because in these exhibitions, even for good teams,
Mm-hmm.
that tends to be where things get rough quick. Like those
Yeah.
last 3 or 4 innings, whether it's freshmen who just aren't ready,
Mm-hmm.
or guys who can't throw strikes, or whatever, guys who aren't going to be on the final travel roster.
Right.
It gets bleak real fast in some of these exhibitions. So yeah, for LSU to go 21 is pretty impressive. And to get your point about multiple innings is good too. I find all of what you said is true about being able to see a pitcher over multiple innings. I also find that when you have the pitcher every inning, it's kind of hard to like focus on how is this catcher moving behind the plate. And oh,
Mm-hmm.
by the way, you're trying to watch the other team in a lot of
Right.
cases for our fall
Right.
report purposes. And it's kind of hard for me to pay a ton of attention to how that guy's running and what the base runners
Mm-hmm.
are doing. And if I'm also like watching the pitch, looking at the radar gun, making,
Right.
like all that stuff. So it is nice when you get multiple innings because then you can kind of maybe
Settle in a little
passively
bit.
watch the
Yeah.
pitcher and then watch
Mm-hmm.
some of the other
Yeah.
players. So
It's a great point.
um
Yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah, good news about Shores. Certainly. I mean, look, the nobody's ever doubted the high end talent here, the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a matter of health and if what it looks like when he's back, and maybe in some ways getting that extra, not being pushed back. I mean, if he was ready, he was ready, but not being pushed back
Mm-hmm.
last year. Maybe that ends up
Right.
being a good thing because he's had now this really extended rehab period where you
Mm-hmm.
would think, he'll be about as good as you could possibly be getting him back up and ready to go. And that's really good news for obviously LSU, but also those of us who like to watch really good pitching, which,
Yeah.
honestly, different topic for a different day, maybe as part of our preview for the season or something. But like last year, that felt like that was kind of lacking. Injuries were a part of it in the SEC. Maybe we just got
Mm-hmm.
spoiled because of Paul Skeens, right?
Yeah.
Hagen Smith obviously gave us a lot to chew on, but outside of that, it just wasn't quite the same.
There was
So
a
the
drop
more
off.
guys,
Yeah.
yeah, the more guys we can get like that, and we'll have Shores has to do it, but the more guys we get with that
Mm-hmm.
kind of ability, the better. Sign me up. So
Yeah.
I saw that Jared Jones hit a couple balls pretty hard. Um, that
I mean,
seems,
he always does, right? Yeah.
yeah,
It's like, I mean, and he took one the other way. I mean, that's the whole deal with him. No one's ever going to doubt his power. So it's just a question of plate discipline. It's, how does he move at first base? Is he a first baseman at the next level? And Jay Johnson said they even tried him a little bit at third just because, he's moving better. He's just a massive human. And
mhm.
I think that, he's just that kind of player with the raw tools. He could take the next step, right? We talked to Jace Laviolette, Gavin Grahovic at A&M. LSU needs someone who kind of can change the game like those two guys can, right? Somebody at that, even nearing that level, and he's the candidate. I mean, he hit what 20, 25, 28 home runs last year, a lot, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
I think the thing with him is just plate discipline. He hit I think he hit around 300, which was, is good, but player with his bat speed, I mean, if he has more contact, just think, what kind of numbers he can put up. So I think he's one of the keys to the team. He's going to be good, but can he elevate and be a superstar? Because if he does, he's got plenty of players around him, and that's really, if I'm looking at a whole on LSU's team, it can somebody be that, the Tommy White, right? The Dylan Cruz. Can somebody take that next step?
Yeah, I totally agree. That was kind of my larger point there, is just that LSU has been blessed with, having transcendent superstars the last couple of years offensively, whether it was, they had Cruz and White the national title year. Then last year they still had Tommy White. And then my other thing is that I think I said this some last year, that Jared Jones had probably the quietest 28 home run year in college baseball history. And some of that is just because home runs are up. So we're not as like wowed by 20 like we used to be even 5-6 years ago. So 28 kind of felt normalized. But I think the other part of it is you still felt like he was a guy that you could pitch to a little bit, like good pitchers you felt like could still get him, 76 strikeouts, so that's to your point that, like, if he can be a more complete hitter, I mean, we're talking about, even with some holes in his swing, he still hit 28 bombs. So like we could be talking about a monster year if he closes up some of those holes.
And the other part of that
numbers on
is,
it.
Go ahead.
I was just quickly put a number. I mentioned the hard hit balls. Hit one 114.9 against Samford and 109.7. The two hardest hit balls of the day for LSU batters in that scrimmage. Go ahead.
Yeah. And the other part of that is just having people around him who can protect him and make sure he gets good pitches to hit. And I think, Luis Hernandez is the Indiana State transfer. He caught the opening game. He actually caught a backswing and had to leave the first game of the day and never returned. But I talked to Jay Johnson later and said he's fine. Just took a shot. He's bruised and sore, but in the long run, he's fine. So, but he's a guy who, he could be right there with Jones. He could be a 20 homer, and I think they need that balance. They need one of them to elevate and the other to be as lineup protection or even better. Hey, they're both elevated. I think that's going to be the key, because LSU has some power with those two guys, but it's more of a line drive. It's more of a battling offense. That they got a little more speed than in past years. They can beat you in different ways. It's not just going to be sit there and wait on guys to mash. I do think that this can be a line drive gap team, when they need to be. You look at guys like Jake Brown, who had his moments as a freshman last year. He's had a good fall. He's probably going to be in the lineup somewhere in one of the outfield spots. I think Derek Curiel, as a freshman, who has had an incredible fall. He's won a spot, at least as of today. He's been their best outfielder. And so, he's not an overly physical guy, but he's got some pop, and he's certainly a great contact hitter, and has a chance to really elevate and be that next level superstar, the next in line, so to speak. I think, Michael Brazel's back, Stephen Milam's back. Both, they're both going to hit and play pretty solid defense. Josh Pearson is back once again. It's, for some role. And I think, one of the keys for them is going to be getting Daniel Dickinson, the Utah Valley transfer, getting him going. He's not had an overly productive fall, but Jay Johnson's not worried. He's a really hard worker, gamer, kind of baseball rat kind of kid, and he just feels like he's gonna be fine. They all go through it at some point, and feels like he's gonna fight his way through it and be a factor. And at this point, he's one of the top transfers in the country, at least coming into the fall. And if he can live up to that, or at least somewhere near that, and now you've got him with what we think Jones may be able to do, and Hernandez and Milam and Jake Brown and all these guys, and that lineup starts to get really long. and that's, if you're an LSU fan, you got to be pretty excited about that, because I don't think they're going to need to score a ton, because they've got so much pitching, and we can go into to those names as well. But this is not a team that I think is going to have to win a lot of 10-9 games. I think it's they score 5 or 6, and that's going to be plenty, and I think they're perfectly capable of doing that.
Yeah, when I look at the lineup they put out to start the game against Samford, and you look at Milam at second base, Braswell at short, and then Dickinson at third base. We got really used to, especially with a national title team, just having explosive athletes. Even a guy, I think about like Jordan Thompson at shortstop, right? Like he was more, for a while, he was more athlete than baseball player, right? He came around to being a more well-rounded baseball player, but he was big arm, big athleticism, like had some raw power, and this team is not that, which is not to disparage those players, but it's like, that's just kind of like a grinder infield, right?
Yeah.
Like none of those guys overly athletic, none of them overly big, right? Dickinson's got
first. Right.
Well, yeah, first taking Jared Jones out of the equation.
Yeah, because he's big enough for the rest of them.
No kidding. Yeah, you could slice him up into 3 parts and give it to those guys. But I mean, Dickinson has some physicality, but we'll see if it translates. I mean, Utah Valley plays at altitude. It's not a very good pitching league they play in. So how much does that transfer? But to the point you and Jay are making, like everything about those 3 guys is that they're probably going to be the 3 hardest playing guys on the field, right? Just given what we know about them. Like Braswell willed himself to being a good offensive player last year. I think a lot of people, myself included, I've pointed the finger at myself about this a whole bunch in the last year. Like I did not think the Braswell thing was going to work all that well. I thought it'd be solid, but he'd hit 9th and that would be the end of it. And by the time the postseason rolled around, he was hitting towards the top of the order, was as consistent as anybody else. And it had a really impressive year. Right.
Take that.
Milam got off to a pretty rough start. Was not really in the mix, and then elbowed his way in, and then he ended up hitting whatever it was, 322 or something along those lines. So like those 3 guys are going to be kind of steady, everyday grinder types. And I think that kind of helps overcome the fact that, take Jared Jones out of it, there's just not a lot of proven explosive tools necessarily here. But I do think just kind of the mentality and what those guys bring to the table does have a chance to elevate this lineup a little bit beyond what the parts might suggest. Let's move to the mound real quick, Mark, unless you had something else there.
Oh, just one other guy I wanted to mention, Chris Stanfield, the Auburn transfer. Gives him a speed element, great defensive center fielder. He's in the mix somewhere. I mean, there's not a lot of spots, but he's going to find time to play. I think he's going to be there. The other guy, Cade Arambidi, catcher, really, really good defensive catcher, and he had 3 hits. Of course, you're playing 21 innings, and he didn't play them all, but he did have 3 hits, and he's going to be in the mix there. So you've got, I don't know, you throw in Dalton Beck, the Incarnate Word transfer, who had monster numbers there. He's going to get some opportunities, and I think the other guy is probably Blaze Priester, who's a junior college transfer catcher. He's hit for power this fall. There's a lot of different versatility with position groups, guys being able to move around and play multiple spots and plug and play to take advantage of matchups. So, there's 14, 15 starters really, and it's just a question of how it's going to shake out on a given day.
Good problems to have for sure. Similar problem on the mound, as you alluded to, Mark. I'll leave it pretty broad here for you to take it wherever you want, but tell us what you liked about the mound that gives you, you mentioned the depth. So tell me what gives you that level of confidence in the depth they have here.
Yeah, there's not just depth. A lot of teams have depth, but there's depth of quality. And I mean, they've got 7, 8 guys who are SEC weekend starters, at least on paper, right? At least, in the fall. After Shores, who we've talked about, Cade Anderson is sophomore eligible, lefty, pitched pretty good bit last year. Some midweek, made some weekend starts. He's better, just a year older. It's really tough to thrive as a freshman in this league. So I look for him to have a big year. Anthony Ianson, the UC San Diego transfer, he looked good. I mean, he was probably mid-90s. Was very effective in his. I think he threw like two and 2/3, something like that. So there's three right there. And then we're talking about Zach Cowan from the Wofford transfer. He didn't throw. He threw the day before in an inter squad, so that tells you, I mean, but Jay said he's in the mix to be in the rotation as well. And then there's William Schmidt, is a true freshman. He started game 3 of this last Sunday. I mean, he's uber talented freshman, big arm, hard thrower. It's going to be a guy. It's just a question of what his role is going to be. And LSU's, they've got the advantage of, you don't have to throw a freshman out there, early in a key spot. You can kind of pick and choose the best route for him to grow and mature. But he may just be too good to sit, right? He may be forced, just be your best option. And that's, it's wonderful for them to have. Gavin Guidry did not throw. Most people remember him the last couple of years as key bullpen guy. They stretched him out and just kind of seeing what he could do, in a longer role, and he's flourishing. So there's another guy who could have a different role than he's had in the past. Probably the guy, other than Shores, that I was most impressed with is junior college lefty Connor Ware. He was probably 93, 94. It looked harder. It's kind of those sneaky fast guys, and with a really good breaking ball. I mean, I think in his 2 innings, he struck out 5. He was dominant. He looked really good. And that was somebody I really didn't know a lot about going into this. Just, he's just a name on the roster to me. But boy, I came away. He left quite an impression. Another fresh, really 2 more freshmen that I liked. Cooper Williams was really good in his time. He followed Schmidt, and honestly, there wasn't much drop off, if any. They were both really good. And then following him was Maverick Rizzi. That's one of LSU's 2 all-name team candidates, along with DJ Primo. I think Maverick Rizzi is a guy. He's like 6'9", 250 pounds. I mean, maybe not that big, but he's a big, tall kid, and he's just. I mean, he was dominant. I think he struck out 4 or 5 as well, and in his time, just he looked really good. Kason Evans is another freshman they've got. I mean, those are 4 really good freshmen. They all threw, and they're all going to have roles, on this pitching staff. And we didn't even see Jacob Myers. So was it Myers? The Nichols transfer, yep. Myers. So he didn't throw. It just goes to show you they filled 21 innings, and Cowan, Myers, and Guidry didn't even throw, along with some others, right? So it's just the pitching depth again. It's just I was just kind of, we talk about Arkansas having great pitching depth, and they absolutely do. But I kind of undersold what LSU has, because I think it's if there's a peer of what Arkansas has, it's in that.
Yeah, Connor Ware was an interesting, came across my radar when I was looking at some of the newcomer information I was putting together. And, first of all, shout out to Pearl River Community College. Seems like every SEC team has like 3 dudes from Pearl River. Dude can really spin a breaking ball. Like that's his MO. It's like 3,200 RPMs. Like it's spinning like a Formula 1 tire.
He was a very uncomfortable at bat.
Yeah.
He was just overmatching.
And if the name of the game is just, you speak of uncomfortable at bats, if the name of the game is making hitters uncomfortable, giving them different looks, you mentioned Rizzi, it's 6'9", but it's a 3/4 release throwing sinkers at you, like it's a lot of, it's really not, at least historically, not with him, not as much about swing and miss, even though he can do that. It's for him. Yeah. It's let's put a heavy fastball on you, from a 3/4, which gives it a little bit of run. And yeah, so it's just not I mean, if those are the guys, I don't want to say spare part because that's a negative connotation, but just like if those are the guys that are like a little bit further down, at least on paper, the pecking order, it kind of illustrates what you're describing here, which is the quality and the quality depth. One last thing, Mark, is more of, this is down your alley because I know this is the kind of stuff that you take notice of, but what was the atmosphere like in Biloxi? I have to imagine LSU fans turned up in good numbers, and sometimes those minor league parks can be a little bit sterile, but I have to imagine that with that crowd, it was not the case.
Yeah, for the first game, it was a really good crowd. It was probably 2/3 full of a 6,000 seat stadium. It was a pretty day. As the day went on, there were a lot fewer people there, as you imagine.
You're telling me
probably 8 hours.
18 through 21 did not have 6,000
people. Not so much, but yeah, it was fun. I mean, I love those kind of deals. It would be some of the Biloxi Shuckers people were there, and they were talking about trying to get spring games there. They have Mississippi State come in every year for their during their spring break and host a couple of games, and they were looking to get Ole Miss and LSU and really anyone else who's gonna bring a good time with them. And so they had talked about in the past they had an opportunity for LSU to play Florida State there during the spring, and then the coaching change happened at Florida State. It kind of fell through, but that would have been amazing, right? To have two big brands like that show up for a midweek game, in March or April. That'd be great for the sport, right? So maybe there or somewhere like that can pull off those kind of games, because it's anytime you get good on good, especially those are good RPI games as well. That it's good for everybody. So I'm encouraging it.
100%. I think we've talked about that on a previous episode when you were maybe after you went to Pensacola. Is that right? You did Pensacola?
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah.
Yeah. Just that I would like to see those types of parks get involved a little bit in the springtime. And I know it's hard, like you're getting prepped for the minor league season and the teams don't necessarily want you trampling their turf, especially if they're still waiting on the grass to take hold, all that. Right. I get it. Like, I understand why it's not the simplest thing in the world, but it just would be nice. I'm definitely with you on that one.
I mean, what it takes is, the financial backing to come through and guarantee it, because you got to talk a big program out of a home game.
Right.
So it's got to be worth their while.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me, we ought to do, just as a quick aside, we need to do, this is Mark and I working out podcast ideas on the air. With the schedules being out, we probably ought to do some sort of episode, because I thought about this just because I find it interesting, and selfishly I'm happy about it that Georgia's coming to Wilmington to play UNCW opening weekend.
Yeah.
And I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think Georgia's stadium, questions about like, okay, exactly what day are we going to be ready might be one of them. Just buy themselves another week,
give a little cushion. Yeah,
right. Might be part of it. But regardless, I mean, that's a good, I mean, anybody who plays college baseball knows UNCW is good, and it's a road series. So like, Georgia playing
I like it.
Whether they meant to or not, they're playing the RPI game by going on the road there. So I say all that to say, like, probably worth our time to do an episode on that, to kind of give the folks an idea of who's doing what from a non-conference. We talked about the SEC schedules already, but from a non-conference standpoint, who's doing what. So that might be for our own sake as much as anything else to kind of wrap our heads around that kind of stuff. So
we still need a few more schedules. There's a few stragglers.
We do.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Who you are.
Yeah. If SIDs, if you're listening, please. I know it's not totally up to you, but get on that. All right, Mark. Well, that seems like an episode. I appreciate you doing the tough work of sitting there for 21 innings. You could. If you have to go to like the chiropractor or something to realign, just send the bill to Kindle at d1baseball.com. Just send that invoice over to him, and
it's on its way.
That's right.
Yeah, what it reminded me of is like conference tournaments. Where you're just sitting there in that uncomfortable chair for hours and hours and hours, and you get up and walk around just so you don't have to sit there. And and I'm keeping score, because there's no live stats or anything like that, so I'm trying to to keep up with what's going on. I'm trying to walk around and just stretch my back and
Get the blood flowing.
Yeah, right. Just get out of this stationary position. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of that was the vibe, right? Because you're playing multiple games, and even though the teams didn't change, certainly the lineups did.
Yeah, no, that's a good call. That's a good comp there. Yeah, it's a marathon. So thank you for the sacrifice, Mark. Our listeners, I'm sure, are thankful for that as well. And that is going to do it for this edition of Highway to Hoover, a production of SEC Extra over at d1baseball.com. Thank you to David Seifert for joining us in the front half of this episode, talking Alabama and Tennessee. Thank you, as always, to Mark for joining me. Thank you to Pitch Logic for sponsoring this and every episode of Highway to Hoover. And thank you, the listener, for listening. We'll talk to y'all soon.